And there are spirits to ages. And what God is certainly going to ask of us is that we stand outside of the spirit of the age. There is no doubt in my mind whatsoever. To this excessive fear of failure. Like we mentioned to you last week, we gave you the example of sometimes the students. They will not do anything in the classroom. They'll fail a class before trying. Because if they try and they fail, then if they have a certain perfectionist spirit to them, they will be infuriated at themselves. So better not to try and fail and be able to shrug your shoulders at the end and say, well, I didn't really try, you know. That's pusillanimity. That's why it always becomes quite delicate. How do you work with children then for their grades? Do you just beat them when they bring a C home? No. So that they're always afraid not to get any higher or not afraid to achieve it? It's difficult because it has to be different for each child. Some you have to beat. Well, beat is a relative term. And then there's others that you have to continue to encourage them toward the better attainment, which they know that they can do. You don't have to convince them of it. They know it already. There are children who know that they're supposed to be doing better. And a small little reproach is enough just to crush them for weeks. That's all they need to kind of goad, just to keep them going. Pusillanimity means it's an excessive fear of failure, so they don't try. They don't try. They just remain inactive. And seeking to avoid blunders, the pusillanimous, that's it. Where'd it go? Pusillanimous. Like we use this word every day. Pusillanimous. The pusillanimous. By trying to avoid blunders, they fall into even greater mistakes. That's classic. You see this all the time. They don't want to do this, so they don't do anything, and so the whole thing just collapses. Or they don't want to deal with the problem now, and so they put it off because they don't want to blunder here. So they wait till it's just a catastrophe beyond description that they have to fix now. And so because they didn't want to do this here, they now have to deal with this disaster. That's what they're describing here. Right? They do nothing, or almost nothing, and so they waste their lives. We were discussing this last Friday. And you go through the city. And you get an idea of what goes on up and down all these different streets, and you see the shallow aspect of people's lives. And one of the few things which comes from my insipid education which I received, one of the things which I called to mind was this insipid piece of poetry from the Rubaiyat by Omar Khayyam. Now you may remember from the 60s, remember all this junk? Oh, brother. But there was a poem in there from this infidel in which it portrayed humanity as being this water poured out. And humanity were the bubbles. The millions of bubbles just being cast out. They appear, they sparkle, and then they're gone forever. Now, some people that might kind of crush them down. I don't know, it must have been 9th grade when we came across this stupid piece of poetry. But it's one of those things which just goaded you to the point that was such a depressing thought of just being a flash in the pan, of having nothing to accomplish. Well, later on it became an idea of accomplishing things for God. That how could you just accept this kind of idea? That you have to achieve towards the greatness in the eyes of God, of course. But to be more than just simply a bubble. And you see these people, they have spent their entire life in front of the idiot box. They spend their whole life in superficial things. They spend their whole life at the mall. They spend their whole life in the most frivolous trinkets. And it is precisely this vice of pusillanimity that they do nothing or almost nothing, and so when the time when they come they die, they just disappear. Their shadow of existence just flutters away, and they're gone. And that's it. So surely, as the children of God, we have a much higher ideal to achieve than just simply making it through. And that's where the virtue of magnanimity comes in. Because obviously it is evidently better to risk making mistakes than to do nothing. Better to make a glorious mistake, even if it's a glorious stupidity, than to have just done nothing. Those are the types of things that you want to instill, especially in your boys, because they're the ones that have to lead. And so they took apart your toaster. All right, well, they're inquisitive. You go in there and beat it all out of them so they don't do it again? No, you reprimand them for it. And then if you have the skill yourself, show them how it goes back together. And if you don't, which is more than likely the case, especially in this day and age, who knows? There could be computer whiz to put anything back together these days. No. Make it a project. They have to figure out how it works. So it depends on their age, right? Not buy things, but encourage your sons in being inquisitive and looking into things. Every single one of your sons should have, well, maybe no, do Lincoln Logs even exist anymore? Okay. Are they still wood? You have to have those when they're little. And then when they get older, you get them their erector sets and all the different things they can work with their hands and put things together. You teach them how to work. Right? You teach them to be inquisitive. Well, you don't teach them too much. They're pretty good at it themselves. But you have to curtail what is wrong and what is disordered. But even if they make a mistake, all right, so fine. No, Dad's car doesn't work. Well, Junior tried. Maybe not with that big of an experiment. Start with small things first. And don't allow them to beat machinery and to give up. Don't allow that. You don't beat them in turn and make them go back out and do it. You have to encourage them to pursue things. And don't allow them to give up. You can't. You can't. Because not only will it be a betrayal to your children, but it will be a betrayal to yourself and to your family's honor. Because you will raise another generation of dish rags. God help us. All right? Now, on this idea of magnanimity, the class it's going to go to conference, sorry. Well, hopefully not, but we'll try. We'll try to get this done. Because in this magnanimity, I brought, so that I could read to you from this letter of Chesterton that he wrote to his fiancée. Because we must have nobility of spirit. We must have nobility of spirit. And some people might have thought after Sunday that I was exaggerating when I was talking about how you train your children for their courtship, that it's hands off. Well, I was not exaggerating. Right? A peck on the cheek is fine, perhaps. Short of that, forget it. Or more than that, forget it. Right? Mother, sister, and Madonna. Those three words were chosen purposely to manifest what was not just simply an ideal, but what is no less obligatory for the children of God. Because we heard, because there were some who might have agreed with everything in principle, but who thought, well, it's a bit much. It's a bit much. It's a bit much. So that was one. I made notes at the beginning of the week. The second was the idea of the chaperone. Right? And there's a number of ideas that I obviously can't elaborate because we can't go through 3-hour sermons. Over an hour is more than enough. The marvelous thing was to find out that your children were listening. A lot of parents told me that their children were listening, and they heard it, which is what I wanted. Your 10-year-old heard, they heard these things, and for once they understood what Father Doran was saying, for once. I said, phew, there he goes again. Well, I guess, I know, we try to make it a little more comprehensive, but these were concrete. And going back to the idea of, from the chaperone, right, the cape, the covering, right? There are numerous images to this, besides just the fact of protection. There is also the covering of the idea of something which is sacred, something which is holy. And you want to instill this in the minds of your children. That the idea of the cape was that you covered not only what was, why was it sacred? Why do you instill in your children that the courtship is sacred? because it is preparation not only for a sacrament, but for the holiest action which the average human mortal will be able to participate in, and which is to cooperate in the creation of life. That is the highest action that a average mortal being is allowed to cooperate in. And when we told you from the very beginning of the sermon that courtship was meant as a preparation is to find a spouse, which meant that ultimately it's a preparation not only for the sacrament of matrimony, but to cooperate in a concrete way in the act of creation, which is a property of God. And so that's one of the aspects of chaperone, which we didn't bring up. We brought the idea of protecting, of covering. But it's also the idea of holy. If you want to put another image, think of it as the equivalent of a chalice veil. Cover that which is sacred. And at the risk of having an influx and a flood of people calling out Our Lady of Victory, Mr. Jones has made a copy of a magnificent pamphlet which I have. Don't call me. He has a copy. In fact, I highly encourage you to reprint it, and you send it out to your 6th grade parents. It's just called Sex Instruction. The title, you look at it and go, looks a little blunt. 1937. It is one of the finest. It's a little pamphlet. It does take a long time to read it, but it is about the most exquisite and refined presentation of the Catholic aspect of the sanctity and the holiness surrounding all these things which take place in the creation of another human being. And when you have instilled that in your children, you will have to say little else. And so these books, this pamphlet has been copied. It would be very good to see it reprinted. I was trying to encourage him to do so. And it is an excellent book. It's an excellent book. And it covers it precisely from that angle, that these things are covered, these things are held in discretion, these things are held in reverence because they are holy. What is the puritanical thing? As we cover these things, we don't talk about them because they're dirty. God help any parent who has instilled in their mouth smack. No, bad. You have the delicate thing, and that's why when your children are inquisitive of these things, you must, to the limit of their age, to the level of their age, you must try to help them along. Which means storks and cabbage patches have never entered into Catholic households. That has never been a tolerable way to talk about children coming, because it's a blasphemy against God. How could we describe something which is so sacred and say that some stupid bird brought a baby? Instead of speaking of the mystery of love, or worse, you find under a clump of vegetation. Now you may feel that way on certain days. You might want to put it back under the vegetation, but you can't. It's a magnificent thing. That is the aspect, when you have that mindset, and when your daughters have been raised with that mindset, and your sons have been raised with that mindset, when you have Aunt Tilly with them, your daughter is not going to rebel against that at all. She is not. And that's why, we're talking about these things because it's some little details I want to cover. Because there are some who thought that it was exaggerated. Obviously did not understand the profundity of thought which came behind these things. It has not been that long ago that these things were done. I'm not talking about reviving a custom from 1295. This is done this century. This is not something old and ancient and never done before. But that's one of the aspects to it. It is. And so this man or this woman who would be chosen for this position, you could not give them a greater honor, short of asking them to be the sponsor of your child as a godparent. There is nothing less, nothing more honorable that you could ask, because you are saying, would you watch over, be with my daughter in her courtship, and to protect that which is sacred and holy? When you approach it from that point, that's not exaggerated at all. It is a sublime reverence for precisely what is sacred. Because you can look at chaperone, it's like, no, they're just going to sit there and smack sticks down and make noises. No, too close. All the things which people will make a mockery out of. All right? Because they do. They make a mockery out of it. People will make a mockery out of it. Throw rocks at them, no, team. You make sure Aunt Tilly, the one you choose out, she has a good slingshot. Or better yet, you give her a little A little air gun. Yes. Where'd you lose it at? In the middle of chaperones. Right in the beginning of chaperones? Oh my. I can't redo it. That's why I'm not going to repeat it for 20 years. These are my notes. You see how much is written on this? I've talked for 20 minutes on this many notes. Well, you'll all have been stunned by the idea of the chaperone, so you can translate it. And then if I hear some bizarre ideas going around, I'll clarify it in a future class. But short of that, so remember that for your daughters, you educate them on this idea that they do not. They don't suggest. They don't suggest. They don't ask. That's why your daughters do not call up the boy who works at Burger King with them. Say, hey, Harry, you want to go out next Friday? Are you free next Friday? It's not for them to do that. It is degrading for them as ladies because it makes them, again, look desperate. And like as I mentioned before, then she may wind up talking about it to her brothers or to her parents. And the first obligation would be Dad. He may say, listen, are you going to take my daughter out again? You asked me to record her. Are you going to take her out again or is this over? Tell me now. Because you're not going to leave my daughter just hanging in limbo. And the answer to come back should be yes, Mr. X, Y, or Z. Not, huh? Right? Huh is another one. Oh, mark against. Okay, well, sorry, honey. He's got about 16 against and 2 for. And the longer we know him, this list is getting bigger. 2 was there when he started, but now it's getting bigger. All right? And keep a tally. So Dad may cover it. Because why? Because he has a love for his daughter. His daughter is hanging there crying in her bedroom because she's not being called or anything like that, or she hasn't got a note. Of course. See how we have to rework everything? We had another man who said that it was not up to him to make sure that this man reverenced his daughter. Well, when I heard that, it's like, well, where were you? You didn't listen to it? Because it means one of two things. It means, one, I don't care if he reverences my daughter. It's not my business. Wrong. And that was clear from Sunday. Or 2, he doesn't have a whole lot of respect for his daughter. What did he raise? Does he really think that his daughter is a lady? In that case, then he has the obligation, darn well, to make sure that this boy shows his reverence to his daughter. If he raised a lady, then she is worthy of being treated as a lady. So that was another thing which I heard through the grapevine. And that has to be corrected. It has to be corrected, that kind of an idea. See? And at the same time, if some of the boys heard the sermon on Sunday, whatever, in the case where their fathers would be negligent, then it's for those boys to stand up for their sisters. If their father does not, those boys have the obligation to stand up for their sisters. They have an obligation. It's not just, it is a family. It is a family situation, it's a family occasion, it is a family affair. It is the whole family is involved in these, not obviously in the courting specifically, but they all are interested. Because the boys, that's going to be their brother-in-law. Right? And they have a right to say, I think he's a jerk, completely unworthy, as long as they have reasons for it, not just because he plays tournament basketball or something. Or something. So that's the idea of the courtship as far as the woman is concerned. That she's not, because she doesn't want to look desperate. Right? Is she or is she not worthy of being wedded? If she is, then why should she look desperate? Please marry me soon, please, please, please. Why? What's this desperation? The second thing is that courtship, and this is what you must teach your children. Now, it may or may not be the time when they get married. It may or may not be. But the period of courtship should really be, if not the most, should be one of the most beautiful times in their lives. We'll give you a parallel with the mind of the church. In our rule for the seminary, the seminary rule, the Archbishop, in the Constitution, the Archbishop put down that for the seminarians and for the priests, that for the seminarians, that the years of seminary should be some of the most beautiful memories which a priest has are the times that he spent at seminary. It parallels, once again, the mind of the church. It parallels the idea of matrimony. What is seminary for? It means a seedbed. It's a preparation for the sacrament of holy orders. It's a little more intense. It's obviously a lot more intense, but the order, you kind of shoot a little bit higher with that sacrament than you do with others. So it's more intense preparation. But it's a preparation for a sacrament, a reception of holiness, we call grace. And so matrimony is the same thing. It is a lay version of seminary, if you want. It is a seedbed in which we are fostering Catholic households. And so in a parallel, the courtship should be some of the most beautiful years, should be a beautiful time in preparation for matrimony, as in parallel with seminary. No, we keep going up one more notch higher, and higher, and higher, and higher, and higher. And this is part of the doctrine of matrimony that the Church has. It is sublime and it is beautiful. In fact, it is one of the things which I found the most edifying, one of the things, along with the mystery of the Trinity, which is just stupendous. But on this huge section that we spent, of all the sections, you spend your largest period of time in moral theologians on matrimony. You spend like one semester out of 3 years on matrimony alone. Months, 5 hours a week, months on matrimony, just matrimony. Because of the importance. And the Church has an absolutely sublime doctrine surrounding these things. And it is a shame that the generations which have gone before, and maybe even these generations, have never heard of the beauty of what the Church teaches concerning the sublime sacrament of matrimony. And so, when courtship is proper courtship should be the most beautiful time in a couple's life. They turn around and say, well, it's been a disaster. It was a disaster. Because some people have said that to me. They say, well, our courtship was hell on earth. It's like, well, why did you get married then? It's like, what happened? That's not a good indication. It's like having the man in his 6th year at the seminary saying, I've hated seminary the whole time. It's preparation for the priesthood. You get an idea of what the priesthood is going to entail here. If you don't like seminary, you're not going to like the priesthood. So that's one thing to teach your children. And that's why, if your sons and daughters, you have to, you be vigilant. You be vigilant. Last concrete point. It's on the question of etiquette. It's on the question of etiquette. It doesn't involve your children directly. It involves us, and it involves us. It's a question that your daughter or your son, when there's an announcement of, so there's been a proposal. He's on his knees. She thinks about it for a while. Make them wait, ladies. Make them wait. It's your last chance. So after that in matrimony, it goes, boom, he's head of the household, and you are in position of obedience and docility. So it's your last great hurrah. I'll think about it. And then you may give him one peck on the cheek, and then say good evening. No more. And you teach your daughter that if he tries more, she smacks him. Hard. Because he has affronted her dignity as a lady. And you ask the question, if you've raised her as a lady, he has a cause and affront against her dignity as a lady. And she is to respond likewise. And if he learns to the first one, that's fine. If he doesn't learn, that's a good sign that she ought to find somebody else more worthy. So just belt him right across the chops. Because it's an insult. It's an insult to your daughter. It's an insult to your family. Mother, sister, and Madonna. Nothing less. Because with her reaction, not only of having offended her dignity as a lady, it's also like, what do you take me for? Smack. It may be a major step towards domestication. It may be a turning point, but it has to be done. And you train them to do that. You train them, and this is the idea of the nobility. You don't smack them because it's dirty or filthy or whatever. No. You smack them because it is not fitting. And that's why you train them to smack, because you teach your daughters that they have a nobility and a respectability, and therefore they must insist that it be respected. And that's why you have chaperones. Because sometimes your daughters are not going to be strong. They have passions too. And they also have a fear of men. Not at all times, but very often on a date, it's a bit intimidating. And if you don't think so, well, you've all been through it, so you get an idea. Unless you raise them men, and then she's ready to take them on, okay? But if she's a woman and a lady and discreet and modest and demure, what a rare creature. But it is what God created them to be. And when they are in that mode, they are the finest things of beauty on the face of the earth. I said it on Sunday, and I will say it again, and I will say it over and over again. That when a woman is in the mode of being a lady, and discreet and demure, she is radiant. And you must train your daughters for that ability to illuminate. That's the nobility. And so it's just the corollary of saying, therefore, if he takes any liberties with you, you smack him. Because he has lowered. And what does he think? Right? So this is a positive point that you train your children with. Obviously, you train your boys, they don't go any farther than that. Right? Which on Sunday when I mentioned this, all the heads kind of went like this. All the faces went down. It may not have been something which was taught in anyone else's courtship before. But now you know. And if someone can find a reason why it should be more than that, then please tell me, because I have been going over this for weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks, meaning each day. These have been notes throughout my planners for months now, technically since the end of September. So 6 weeks now has been a day in and day out, continual thought on what must be necessary for the sanctity of matrimony. If anyone can see why there should be more than just simply a little sign of affection at the end of an evening, a peck on the cheek, then please tell me. And if someone has figured out why they have raised their daughter to accept more than that, then please tell me why they've done so. You see, and it eliminates all of these asinine questions of how far can we really go. Those questions are so out of place of the nobility which is fitting of Catholics. Okay? So that's a positive point. But in this idea of dignity, it is the same reason in etiquette. I have to look it up. If someone look it up in Emily Post, who knows? That when there's an announcement of this affair, you congratulate the groom-to-be. You do not congratulate the woman. Who has heard that before? Yes. Yes. Now why? Because his suit, his proposal has been accepted. His laying at the feet of a contract has been accepted. So you congratulate him because he is the one who has had to, so to speak, make all the effort in the sense of making sure that he pleased her in all ways. So you congratulate him that there has been someone who's accepted this suit. But if you congratulate her, it sounds like, hey, someone finally decided to marry you, great. And so it's rude. It's rude. You don't do it. You don't do it. You don't congratulate. She asked if they were pleased to hear the news. I say, congratulations, honey, you finally did it. No. And you train your children in that way. But see, it all connects together. See, since a number of you have heard that part, but you hadn't heard anything else, it was one of the last corollaries of all this idea of courtship, which still remained as residue. But since there's only half a dozen hands that went up in this whole room, it's not much of a residue left. But it's a corollary of everything else that we have said. It's a corollary, it just flows. It's an effect of everything else we have said concerning the courtship and dating. That when it comes time of announcement, you congratulate the groom, you don't congratulate the bride. Right? Passing note. So you congratulate the man, but not the woman, because she has accepted. It's like when someone comes back and, you come home from work and you say, guess what, honey, I just landed this tremendous contract for $40,000 or whatever. It's terrific. It's going to last over the next year, and then it'll probably be renewed on a regular basis for the next 3, and then it might be a permanent contract. You say congratulations and you rejoice with your husband. You don't call up the buyer and say, congratulations, you made a really good contract. It's like, huh? All right? Well, you want to put it in concrete terms, that's where it comes. That's these notes. Now we read you from Chesterton's letter. Yep. Naturally, I had it marked. I pulled this paper out and I lost it. We'll find it though. We're not going to do this again. This is once off. It's not going to be an annual series of sermons. Some of you will probably be thrilled, but others just have to work on their memories. Get the tapes, take down notes, and then tack them in your room so that each of your children come up. You'll be able to keep training them all the way through. Continual constancy. Oh, that was dumb. Oh, there it is. A proposal inspired, this is a Fulton Sheen. Someone lent me this book after we did the first two sermons. Oh, this is great. And that's why I found Chesterton's letter. It's on chapter 2 called Three Kinds of Proposals. It's interesting. It's really interesting. A proposal inspired by love. Yeah, he mentions the when love is mutual self-giving. He describes different types of love there are. And obviously not every single courtship goes around self-giving. It's very clear. But when a proposal is prompted by this kind of love, will often be made on the knees, figuratively or realistically, in order to express a deep sense of one's unworthiness of the gift. I offer my life to you if you accept it. What a beautiful image to teach your boys. And it goes back to the idea that they are never to assume that any woman is due to them. That's the boys to realize. The boys are on their knees. You train your daughters so that their beauty and this radiance makes the men fall to their knees, and you make sure that your boys reverence their women that they court to the point that they are on their knees. It's perfectly proper. Perfectly proper. Because it is a request for acceptance. Like, hey honey, you're going to get hitched. No. Will you accept the proposal to be my wife for the rest of my life? Will you accept me as a person? It's the giving of my person. The beloved is on a pedestal, the lover on his knees. I'm not making any of this up. In fact, I found this book after, which always makes me feel good, but I'm not just shooting off in the dark. The beloved is on a pedestal, the lover is on his knees. The humility born of a conviction of unworthiness escaped the lips of the centurion in the face of the divine master, and reappears on the lips of every lover of the divine, with a capital D, at the moment of communion. What he has done is he's always linked, and I haven't read the book, but in the parts that I've looked at, he has connected continually courtship, marriage with the Mass, sacrifice, the Holy Trinity, the work of redemption, continual. So here he's comparing courtship to communion at the sacrifice of the Mass. Because lover receives beloved in Holy Communion, and therefore marriage is supposed to be a reflection of this union of Christ and the Church, results in the same humility of kneeling before the beloved, because what we propose as a contract is to reflect Christ and his Church for the rest of our lives. These are the things you want to instill in your children. The humility born of conviction of unworthiness. All right, so it reappears on the lips of every lover of the divine at the moment of communion. Domine non sum dignus. Lord, I am not worthy. Being on one's knees indicates submission, servility. It is indeed the attitude of a slave. But therein is the great mystery of love and freedom. Freedom is ours to give away. Freedom is ours to give away. It's going to be another Christian paradox. I give you my freedom to be bound for life. Paradox. 4 weeks ago, what it was. Or the All Saints. All Saints. It was All Saints sermon. The paradox of the Sermon on the Mount. Freedom is ours to give away. We want to be free from something in order to be free for something. The proposal means, quote, I have wanted my freedom only to be free to choose you. That's magnificent. And when I choose you, I choose that which is perfect for my life, and the perfect leaves nothing else to be desired. And that's why we brought up in the point that you must, in training your children that love is something which is to be given, not just yanked. It is something which is to be given. It is something which means that courting is just all these ideas for your children to find a spouse, what we gave you 3 weeks ago, and the idea that this is to draw you closer to God. From this point, I choose what is perfect, that which is perfect for my life, and the perfect leaves nothing else to be desired. From this point on, I am a slave. My slavery is my freedom, for I want nothing else but to love you. Now, any young man that came to your daughters with those words on his lips, she would just pass out. But could there be any more ultimate flattery? A proposal inspired by this love is not only an affirmation, it is also a negation. If the young man tells the woman that he loves her above all the other women in the world, she might ask, but how do I know that? According to the latest census, there are 648,947 other eligible women in this vicinity. How can you say that you love me more than any one of them? His answer might be, because when I affirm that I love you, I, by the same token, negate everyone else. This was the key when I said that we must all realize that we are going to find people throughout our lives which we are very capable of falling in love with. Anyone who thinks that that's not true is crazy, or has a very cold heart, or has just been in a matrimony just for the sake of fittingness or something, whatever. You will always find people that you can fall in love with very easily. That will always be the case. Matrimony means that I have bound myself to one person. It doesn't mean there's only one person that I could possibly ever marry in the world. It means that I have bound myself for life to one person freely. That's what love means. And so that's why he says here that it's a negation. Because when I affirm that I love you, I, by the same token, negate everyone else. In choosing you, I reject all others. I have only one heart, and I can give it away but once. So the choice had better be good. This is the idea that's being emphasized here. And you must teach your children to pray. They must pray. Furthermore, there are only 2 words in the vocabulary of love. You and always. 2 words. You and always. You because love is unique. Always because love is enduring. In the proposal, the man generally gives reasons for loving. The woman gives none. This is true. Man being more rational, it's not Bishop Williamson, see? Ha ha ha! It's not just Bishop Williamson. Man being more rational feels that he must justify everything he does. So from the deep garden of his heart, he plucks up the flowers of 1,000 reasons, such as her beauty, her mind, her goodness, her charm, and 1,000 other reasons too numerous to mention. Remember, if there's too much, it's too little. The woman in her turn gives no reasons, for her love is its own reason. Which is one of the reasons why, dads, you have to be the voice of reason in your daughter's courtship. Because her love is just sufficient reason. Dad, step in. All right, you train your daughters. All right, an interesting proposal was that of G.K. Chesterton. He was standing on a little bridge in St. James Park, London, when he asked Frances Blogg to marry him. He certainly won out with a better last name. Afterward, Chesterton went home to tell his mother. The mother, noticing the tension of the young man, asked offhandedly, "Gilbert, how do you like my new wallpaper?" She's trying to lighten up the conversation here a little bit. He, training as an art student, his training as an art student came to his assistance. He jumped up, took a piece of black crayon from his pocket, and drew on the new wallpaper a portrait of Frances. That's expressive. He went back to his quarters and he wrote to Frances. Part of this is a quotation of the letter. "I am overwhelmed with a tremendous sense of my own worthlessness. which is very nice and makes me dance and sing, neither with great technical charm. Should you be inclined to spurn me, now, it's the same day. Should you be inclined to spurn me, pray do so. If it even enters your heart to do so, then do it. I can't think why you don't, but I suppose you know your own business best. What a position. On another occasion, he wrote out his reasons for thanksgiving. Quote, first for creation out of the same earth. Reasons for thanksgiving. Right? First, for creation out of the same earth with such a woman as you. The second is that I have not, with all my faults, gone after strange women, which makes parallel to the idea of the marriage between God and Israel, the Old Testament. Very scriptural. You cannot think how a man's self-restraint is rewarded in this. The third is that I have tried to love everything alive, a dim preparation for loving you. The fourth is, this is nice, but no words can express that. Here ends my previous existence. Take it. It led me to you. Now, that's not bad. That is quite sublime. So, are there any questions? So we can lay this one low for time and eternity and something that to be repeated for the next 20 years. Yes. Who took really good notes? Nobody. See? They're all in a position of humility now. No one will admit they've taken good notes. But you know, the problem is that I don't even have half of the things that I said written on this sheet. That's the problem. Oh, the matron, and then this, the could have been martyr. Yes, I was amazed to see everyone all of a sudden remembered this sermon on the priest as an icon of God, as a priest of the icon of the Word incarnate. They already preached that sermon the year before, 2 years before. No one remembered it. No, they remembered it. It may come back. Yes. Well, don't forget though the question of the book on the education. No, you have to train your children. Yes. Whenever we get to a point where there are, yes. I think that since 1992, I can say that we probably went through numerous steps, and not numerous, that's always meaning up, but just points of, last week I said points of no return. In other words, we cannot look at this as a sign, because there's no reason. I gave you last week why the idea of these sermons even came up. And it was really not even directly related to the idea of matrimony. It was related to the idea of finance. And so there was no direct relation. And whenever we've had these, or the ones concerning vocation, or the ones concerning education of children, or school, or dedication to the Catholic life, or the position of men, the famous, January 6, 1993, on the Holy Feast of the Holy Name, and the responsibilities of men, there have always been points in which we can never say, well, we can take it or leave it. Because God is very generous in the graces that He gives to all of us, myself included, in which we have to act upon them. And so it's not meant to say, it's this momentous thing, but it is when there are specifically and very clear graces. I mean, we're not just discussing you've got to practice virtue and love Jesus and die and go to heaven. We're talking about things which are very clear, which seem to be being solicited by the Sacred Heart. And because of that clarity, watershed means that this is it. We're on this side now. And that's why I would be extremely disappointed, in the years to come to find out, well, this family or that family just has their daughter just running off with Junior in the Spokane for the evening. No. Disappointment. Not the fact that it's going to be considered sinful, obviously not. Less than noble, yes. Less than worthy, yes. I'll be extremely pleased when I hear 5 years from now when this young lady who her boyfriend takes a little more of liberty and she smacks him right across the face, you know. We'll see you as the first mother who has trained their daughter to do that. That'll be great. Because that's the thing. You parents now are the ones who have to set the pace. That's the watershed idea. You can wait till your children say, oh, when my daughter grows up, she goes to St. Dominic's, you know, she'll have chaperones for her children. How do you know that? You don't know that. Somebody has to start. It's like the one sermon on vocations. When I said, everyone says, you know, wasn't this great? My children will go into religion. No. It's this generation. It's this generation who goes in. Say, well, I'll get married and what? No, but you need to keep dragging out this bleeding of the church for another generation. Why? There's no reason why. Now, if there's really a true discernment of it, fine. It's wonderful, glorious, magnificent. There'll be a sanctified household. But a lot of times it gets sidetracked in its selfishness. And that's what I tried to emphasize through these last 2 years, is that too often setting the standards at a high place have been dropped down because of selfishness. Not evident selfishness. You know, because the devil is always a master of disguises. And temptations under the appearance of good are his most perfidious tactics. And so it's the same thing here. Now with matrimony, you can't say, well, my children will do this. No, because if you don't do it, your children won't. Unless they have a tyrannical monster in the pulpit 25 years from now who does the same thing to them that I'm doing to you now. And thanks be to God. They're not besieged. They don't beat on them all the time. But it's for this generation. That means your 10-year-old daughter, when she's dating, has a chaperone in the year 2000. Oh, no, not year 2000. In the year 2005. Forgot what year it was. It just stopped. Oh. You see? In 10 years from now, in the year 2005, you have somebody out there. You know, and this is just for the idea of enveloping the preparation in parallel with the seminary for the sacredness of matrimony. That's all. It's not even the idea of just avoiding sin. Notice what I'm saying. It is not, all of these things are not being placed here to avoid sin. Even when she smacks him across the chops, it is not to avoid sin. It is because it lowers her dignity as a lady. Very simple. Noblesse oblige. If there's anything you've heard since I came in August of 92 is noblesse oblige. We are called to be the children of God, and we must act as the adopted children of God. Nothing less. And if those are the standards that we set, sin's not even going to enter into the picture, because our main concern is virtue. If you're always on this, walking this edge of what's sin and what's not, that means you are not straining after virtue. And that's the problem we have had in the church for generations, is giving everyone, where is the line of mortal sin? I am not going to give you the lines of mortal sin. Because if that's the case, half people are just going to choose to walk that line and go to hell. Well, that's not what I'm here for. To give you the barrier that, don't toy with because you might go over, so you walk 2 steps over. No. That's why we give you a goal which is here. Because if you would strive towards that, you're not even anywhere near the barrier. And that's why you teach them to belt them across the face. Because you're training them to be ladies. And that's why when I heard this one father say, it's not up to me to make him reverence my daughter, that's just unacceptable because he has missed the whole point. Yes, it is your responsibility. And it will be the responsibility, if need be, to watch over your grandchildren and your great-grandchildren and your great-great-grandchildren. And if your great-great-granddaughter needs a dowry, then you don't go to the Bahamas with the little old lady that's next to you for the last 120 years, and you give the money for her dowry. It is until death do us part, and your great-great-granddaughter needs a dowry. That money comes out of the bank, and it goes towards her marriage. That's what you married for. You did not marry to go to the Bahamas. You married for your family. And that great-great-granddaughter is a member of your family. Especially if your great-grandson-in-law is a deadbeat. You should have stepped in as patriarch and said, you are unworthy of my great-granddaughter. That is his position. And men have got to start doing this. That's not tyrannical. For him to stand up in the middle of a dinner and to look at Junior in the eyes and to say, you are unworthy of my great-granddaughter, And I'm ashamed that you, my grandson, and you, my son, have not said anything to protect her nobility and her virtue. Shame on you. That is not the way I raised you. That's the image of a patriarch, because he is defending the nobility of his family, his house, his lineage. Where has gone the honor of people's names? There were times when people would be upset when they'd be insulted. Well, there's the ultimate insult taking place on his great-granddaughter. She is going out with someone who is a wretch. And he has an obligation to stand up and to say, you are a wretch. Now he may be more diplomatic and just simply say, you are unworthy. And I wish not to see you dating my great-granddaughter anymore. And if he has raised his son and his grandson with the idea of the fact that it is his family, they will first be tremendously humiliated in front of the rest of that family, which is fine. They deserve to be humiliated because they have allowed their grandson and their granddaughter and their daughter to be put in this precarious position publicly. So they deserve to be humiliated publicly. And so if the patriarch stands up and denounces this, he has done exactly what he is supposed to do. This is the image and the idea that I want to bring across. It is why the church says twice, maybe even 3 times during your nuptial mass, may you be blessed by the God of Isaac, Abraham, and Jacob, and may you see your children's children to the 3rd and 4th generation. That is not just some hypothetical, isn't this nice, live a long time. May you see your children, and may the grace of this sacrament of matrimony which you receive today be your strength and fortitude that you direct this family and its lineage, because you have shouldered the burden into the next generation of its honor. These are the ideas you must have in your mind. And that is why when you hear a man say, well, it's not up to me to make him reverence my daughter, it's like, you're going to tear your garments. What are you doing? You blaspheme against the sacrament of matrimony. Oh, it's amazing that I can even talk after these things. If I could just impress the ideal upon, specifically you men, and here it's do or die. I mean, catechism class, you're here out of a sacrifice of your time, and especially on this evening. And if you don't listen, there ain't nobody else in the parish who's going to listen. Because nobody else is making the extra progress. Well, they're not, forget it. Erase, back. No, that's not what I said. It's like when I look at the Holy Name men, I said, if you don't do it, nobody else in the parish is going to do it. It's beyond my comprehension why there are men who do not join the Holy Name. Why? Is it too hard to abstain from perjury and blasphemy? Is it too hard to profess the belief in our Lord's divinity? What is difficult about it? It's not like they ask you to walk 6 miles carrying this 300-pound cross every Sunday afternoon, as penance. None of that's required. It is to gain this idea of nobility oblige. Noblesse oblige. It is a glorious title. And when you have acquired this idea, you will radiate light, and northern Idaho will become Catholic by next Tuesday. I can assure you. There is a wonderful phrase from Scripture from the Old Testament, which in fact when I came up with these notes on Sunday morning, between the sermons, I didn't want to use it at the Mass. No, it was Monday morning. I'm sorry, it was Monday morning. See, every day. Monday morning. It is a phrase from the Old Testament. It says, those were the days when giants walked the face of the earth. Now it makes reference to this type of the people that were the sons of generations back. It's in the Old Testament. But it is used in quotation by the writers, by the spiritual writers, of the days when the giants. Can you imagine the 4th century? St. John Chrysostom, St. Jerome, St. Augustine, St. Basil, St. Gregory of Nazianzen, St. Gregory of Nyssa. Even the sitters were monsters, were giants, were huge men. Julian the Apostate, as far as character went, was a very large figure. We won't say he was a great man because he wasn't great. But at least there was a certain stature to him. Now everyone's just mealy-mouthed and just dish rags. And I want to see giants rising up from this congregation. But that requires fortitude. It requires the strength to lay the feet in order to attack and to sustain. I want to see men who stand in front of their families. I want to see men who defend their wives, both in their honor and the reverence that they pay to their wives. I want to see men who train their children positively, not just, they're basically all right, they're not too much out of place. I know they're not breaking windows at school, they're okay. No. Which means it's more than just simply pray your rosary and go to Mass. And when Junior doesn't do that, well, I don't know what's happening. It's because you must instill in Junior's heart the idea of nobility. And then our children will be greater than us. Please be God. To see the children be greater than their parents because of what they were given. Because your children are being raised only with the Catholic faith. They don't have to go through this torrential mudslide of garbage and rubbish of the 60s and the 70s, which the rest of us went through. They are being raised. The only Catholicism they know is whole and integral. They have the entire world before them. But if you just buckle under the world at the end of the century, the children will be destroyed. They will be ruined. Because you can have them say all the rosaries you want, but if you have not laid the foundation, because grace builds on nature, then the children will not do anything. And they will be no better than us. Which is not a lot. Because if we examine the last 15 years, and especially in reference to what the last 3 weeks of sermons were, the only reason why you and I are here is purely a miracle and the grace of God. If we look over the last 15 or 20 years, we know this. And anyone who doesn't know it has not been listening. None of us have done anything right. Well, we've done some things right. In fact, some of the families have done things, quite a bit of things, quite good. Only because they had a crotchety old grandfather who beat on them when they were little, who gave them that direction. Or their dad was one of these people who just kind of made sure that things were in a row. Their father might have been a Protestant, but he had still some integrity left of Catholic civilization. And because he had that, he gave what he only had left to give to his children of a dying social order, of a dying Christianity. And he gave what was left. And thanks be to God, their sons picked it up. So the children, at least now, who are in their 20s and their 30s now, had something. They had some residue. Because people have come to me and they said, you know, I talked to my aunt, or I talked to this person, or talked to that person, and they said how they didn't move out of the house, how they didn't do this, how they didn't do that. And they never understood it till now. And the person who didn't move out of the house, the woman who didn't move out of her house until her parents passed away because she was taking care of them, she may not even have known why she did that. She just did it because society says you have an obligation to your family. She didn't have to go through 14 months of the hierarchy of the virtue of charity because it was part of the Catholic social order, or at least what was left in residue form in a Christian order. But we don't have that anymore. We don't have that. You must understand the desperation of the situation. It is more than just moving here, defying the Mass and the fact that you've got somebody running around in a collar or a veil looking at your children during the day. That's not why you're here. We are here to restore, to the best of our abilities, what is dead. It is dead. It is not going to come back unless somebody picks up the ball in this generation and begins to go forward. It's that simple. The ball's been fumbled. It's been dropped. It's a mess. We are losing the game. And if everyone just stands here thinking, I don't want to be linebacker. No, can I go stand back there, please? I really don't want to. Do I have? No, you pick up the ball. No, I don't want to pick up the ball. You pick up the ball. Well, why don't we wait for Junior to pick up the ball? The image being religious life, all right? That's the first thing. The image being religious life. Well, I'm not. Well, I'll just have a team, and then the next team will pick it up. No! No, no, no. I don't think it can be more concrete. Okay, fine, we're done blathering. Any more questions? You're done. We're finished.